This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We're back. We got more Q to do. It's like Groundhog Day. Grab your coffee, fist bump your neighbor. You know the routine. Let's go. 4,331 minutes after the hour of 9. We have a link to the Federalist. This is from May 21st. And we're just going to skim some key points here. I think the big point that Q is making is that this is going to start dripping out, as you can see right here. The Federalist is starting to talk about this story, how the Obama administration weaponized surveillance laws to target Trump. And it shouldn't be a big surprise that the Federalist is talking about this. But I do think that this is going to start to set the tone for the next few weeks as we start to actually bring this story out. A lot of people are admitting that this really went down. The drip of newly declassified documents related to the Trump-Russia investigation, together with recent reports that a classified leak against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn might not have come from an unmasking request. Now listen to this. Leaves little doubt that the Obama administration weaponized federal surveillance laws to target Trump associates and undermine the incoming administration. Okay, so it goes on to talk about this letter that Susan Rice had written to herself. According to Rice's bizarre email, which she wrote to herself as President Trump was being inaugurated on January 20th, 2017, Comey told Obama and Biden he had some concerns that incoming NSA Flynn is speaking frequently with Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Okay, so this was supposed to be a big part of why they were needing to use the FISA surveillance in the first place. Flynn's conversation with the Russian ambassador became national news after someone in the Obama administration illegally leaked to Washington Post columnist David Ignatius. That's when it became a big deal, who revealed in a January 12, 2017 column that Flynn had spoken to Kislyak several times on December 29, 2016. Okay, so then it goes on to talk about this request by Republicans, Don Johnson and Chuck Grassley, to get more of these names to find out who was really unmasking Flynn. And that's the big thing right here. During those weeks, no fewer than 39 Obama administration officials unmasked Flynn. And we talked about that a few shows ago. We actually showed you some of the names. Q had released that, and we've seen that all over the internet now. 39 names. But what was curious about this was that the fact that a lot of these people were unmasking, including people like Samantha Power, they were doing this long before the call even took place, which suggests that there was something nefarious going on. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper to people who had no conceivable reason or unmasking Flynn, like former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, and Obama's Chief of Staff, Dennis McDonough. Even Biden was on the list. Now, incidentally, Biden has been officially listed as an alleged perpetrator of a crime out there in Ukraine. A Ukrainian judge just announced that he is, I guess you could say, officially an alleged perpetrator of a crime dealing with Burisma. That just happened today, and John Solomon just reported that. So it goes on to talk about the unmasking requests and why they were trying to reveal Flynn's identity, likely because he knew where a lot of the bodies were buried. But let's get to the meat of the matter here. But Obama and Biden and other top law enforcement and intelligence officials need not have committed crimes to have egregiously abused their power. It now appears that Obama officials used intelligence authorities to defeat the entire purpose of the Federal Intelligence Surveillance Act, that is, to do the very thing that led to the creation of FISA, spy on their political opponents. Okay, well, I think that's going to be common knowledge very soon, but it is important to note that they're saying need not have committed crimes. Now, we don't know what will come out of this. I have a feeling that if we're trying to take all these people down, Obama will probably be one of the trickiest. I think Biden will probably have to end up dealing with something one way or another, but it may be through Ukraine. But I think the world at some point is going to realize that Obama spied. I'm not so sure he will be dealing with any sort of criminal crime unless, of course, something else pops up. So let's handle some of the history here. To understand how they did this, a bit of historical context is in order. Congress passed FISA in 1978 as a result of the Church Committee hearings, which were convened in response to revelations that President Richard Nixon and prior presidents had used the FBI and CIA to spy on U.S. citizens and organizations, including anti-war groups and political dissidents. We talked a lot about that because we were talking about the Weatherman Underground, as well as the Black Panthers, the SDS. These were some of the groups, and it was a bit of a mess because these intelligence agencies were spying on these citizens. Now, some of these citizens were doing some terrible things, so there was no real white hat, black hat kind of thing going on. But what we did find out was that the intelligence agencies were spying on us. Now, let me just sum it up down here. Obama admin distorted FISA beyond recognition. Proponents of FISA likely never imagined that warrants for electronic surveillance or unmasking requests might be used by an outgoing administration to spy on an incoming one. But that appears to be what happened in the Trump-Russia investigation and the targeting of Flynn. So I think the general idea to be gathered from this article is to let people know that here were these laws that were set up to protect American citizens, and yet it appears the Obama administration used those very laws to spy on American citizens. Freaking jerk. Post 4301, 44 minutes after the hour of 9. We get this article from the New York Times. Inquiry by CIA affirms it spied on Senate panel. This was from back in July of 2014. An internal investigation by the CIA has found that its officers penetrated a computer network used by the Senate Intelligence Committee in preparing its damning report on the CIA's detention and interrogation program. The report by the agency's Inspector General also found that CIA officers read the emails of the Senate investigators and sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department based on false information, according to a summary of findings made public on Thursday. One official with knowledge of the report's conclusions said the investigation also discovered that the officers created a false online identity to gain access on more than one occasion to computers used by the committee staff. So you may remember this story because it involves a very familiar player. A statement issued Thursday morning by a CIA spokesman said that John O. Brennan, the agency's director, had apologized to Miss Feinstein, being Diane. They say that you're fine, but you're not really Feinstein, and the committee's ranking Republican, Senator Saxby Chambliss, which is a sweet name. Not even going to lie. Saxby Chambliss. And would set up an internal accountability board to review the issue. The statement said that the board, which will be led by a former Democratic Senator, Evan Bay of Indiana, could recommend potential disciplinary measures and steps to address systematic issues. Okay, so just a reminder that our boy Brennan has been caught injecting a little intel before. So this is what that story was about. Committee Democrats have spent more than 5 years working on a report about the CIA's detention and interrogation program during the Bush administration, which employed brutal interrogation methods like waterboarding. Parts of that report, which concluded that the techniques yielded little valuable information and that CIA officials consistently misled the White House and Congress about the efficacy of the techniques, are expected to be made public sometime this month. Committee Republicans withdrew from the investigation, saying that it was a partisan smear and without credibility because it was based solely on documents and that there were no plans to interview CIA officers who ran the program. The CIA officials penetrated the computer network when they came to suspect that the committee's staff had gained unauthorized access to an internal CIA review of the detention program that the spy agency never intended to give to Congress. A CIA lawyer then referred the agency's suspicions to the Justice Department to determine whether the committee staff broke the law when it obtained that document. The Inspector General report said there was no factual base for this referral, which the Justice Department has declined to investigate because the lawyer had been provided inaccurate information. So Feinstein rightly called out Brennan, and this was what Brennan had to say. Hours later, Mr. Brennan was publicly questioned about the dispute and said that when the facts come out on this, I think a lot of people who are claiming that there had been this tremendous sort of spying and monitoring and hacking will be proved wrong. Okay, well, this was back in 2014, and the investigation had been going on already for about 5 years. So, and there are a lot of people involved in this. There are a lot of people that would probably know about this. I would imagine Gina Haspel knows a lot about this because because she got a lot of flack for this. I would imagine maybe an Ezra Cohen Watnick might know a thing or two about what went on with this story. But I think the point is that we've seen Mr. Brennan doing some spying, and it looks like their own agents were injecting some of that intel. So it looks like back then they were attempting to cover up some actions, and maybe we'll get some more reveals as to what was really going on with some of this alleged torture, right? But they were trying to cover up some activity, and it looks like they were trying to inject some faulty information in order to do that. There was all kinds of mishandling of intel going on, and we see a similar thing going on now with the Obama administration spying on not just the Trump campaign, but political opposition. It could have very well been Ted Cruz, right? Whoever was going to be the political opposition. They didn't know yet it was going to be Trump. So what does all this mean? And when you are maybe debating your Trump-hating friends, or I really hate doing the left-right thing because I don't think this is all about that. But the people who are kind of thinking that maybe you're obsessed with Hillary's emails, you're obsessed with licking the boots of Trump. Why are you supporting this guy so much? Why is this such a big deal? Why are you so obsessed with these emails? Why do you hate Obama so much? Here's the bigger picture. And I want to take you to 3006. This was from the 10th of March, 2019. And we're just going to skim through here. But it started off talking about Nellie Orr. Well, Nellie Orr was a CIA asset, and she spoke Russian. She was one of the people getting direct information from Russian contacts as well as Christopher Steele. She was probably passing that off to Bruce Orr. And from there, I'm not exactly sure what the next step would have been. Could have been Bill Priestapps, could have been James Baker, could have been Peter Strzok, could have been Andrew McCabe. I'm not exactly sure what the next step would have been, but there was a pattern there. What access does a House member have? What access does a House committee member have? Think Brennan spy campaign. Well, remember, Brennan's got all these different little intel groups over there in Ukraine himself. What happens when the CIA, missing the I, targets spy insertion? The executive, House, Senate, DOJ, FBI, state, etc., branches of the United States government. Listen to that again. When the CIA targets the executive, House, Senate, DOJ, FBI, state, etc., branches of the United States government, meaning that this intel agency right here was going after all of these different branches. That's fighting words. How many so-called former CIA agents ran for House elections in 2018? Well, that starts to kind of open up a bigger picture, right? We see why they've scattered so many of their agents into politics, because this will help them cover a lot of activity up. What party? Democratic Party. Now, this easily could have happened to the Republican Party. That's why this isn't really so much a partisan thing. Although we have to realize that it does matter when it comes to going to the polls, right? The Democratic Party is infested. This could have happened to the Republican Party too, and it is infested in the Republican Party too. But mainly they went into the Democratic Party because they wanted to beat the opposition. What happens when the CIA targets spy plus tech insertion of Google, Facebook, LifeLog, Twitter, etc.? Well, this is where it matters, and this is why it should matter to your friends. The CIA targeting spy and tech insertion of Google, Facebook, LifeLog, Twitter, etc., etc. LifeLog being essentially Facebook. What happens when people wake up to the fact that Facebook is a cover for LifeLog? Look, if you're not familiar with LifeLog, it is a big project, and it was a long project. And if you think they just simply ditched it because the people didn't really like it, you are being fooled. And I don't think many of you think that to begin with. But LifeLog was going to predict what you wanted. How many times have you been on Facebook and you were just thinking about something? Next thing you know, there's an ad for it, right? This is already being done. What happens when people discover all our real-time data, inputs, listening, camera, GPS meta is being harvested and made accessible to Langley? Charter of the NSA, domestic and foreign. Charter of the CIA, foreign, not domestic, forbidden by law. And we just read about that, right? These same laws that were used to protect American citizens are being used to spy on them. Millions. Not just Congress, not just Trump, not just Ted Cruz, not just Carter Page, not just George Papadopoulos. You get the idea. You and me. and that's why it matters, and that's why it should matter to you, friends. So I think it's pretty plain to see that Mr. John Brennan, who back in the day was CIA station chief out there in Riyadh, just so happened to sign off on the 9/11 hijackers' visas and spied on us back in 2015, doesn't seem to have a problem spying on us now, was likely our quarterback. I'd say that's worth remembering. Let's move on. Now with post 4302 and post 4303, we're kind of talking about the same thing here. 4302 was posted at 50 minutes after the hour of 9, and 4303 53 minutes after the hour of 9. This first one here, Q says expand your thinking. The second one, Q says logical thinking. CIA coming back into the news soon in brackets. So the first link from 4302 is this 5-page, it's actually part of a Newsweek article from 1986 talking about reporters and the CIA. And we're going to touch on a little bit of this. There's so much in here, to be honest with you. But there's a couple things that I do want to pick out from here. But we're not just talking about the reporters in the CIA. We're talking about the KGB, and that's a big deal. Now, the second document is 50 pages long, and we're not going to spend much time talking about this, but I want to add that we're not just talking about the CIA's use of journalists, but clergy. And that's going to become very relevant too. We just talked yesterday about how POTUS was referencing Pope John Paul the other day, wishing him a happy 100th anniversary of his birthday. So it's a long document here, 50 pages long. As you can see, it just went blank on me right there. But it's a pretty big deal. We've actually talked about this very same document before, but I want to take you back to these posts right here, 827 and 834. This was from looks like February 24th, 2018. The other is from March 4th, 2018, and Q mentions the bridge. But let's take a look at 827 first. We see this name, Stanislav Lunev, and that's who I do want to talk about. This was a former Soviet military officer, and he had a lot of different secrets about the KGB. He ended up defecting to the U.S. in 1992. He had been a GRU intelligence officer. He had been all over through Asia, China, Singapore, but he ended up defecting to the U.S. in 1992, and he worked as a consultant. He was actually part of the FBI's witness protection program, and he was a consultant to the CIA. Sounds relevant. So he ended up publishing this book called Through the Eyes of the Enemy. And in it, he talks about how the GRU, the KGB, were spending a ton of coin funding the American anti-war movement. So if you think about that, that was a massive movement back in the 60s. And of course, I made 2 videos, Weatherman 1 and 2, talking about how important the anti-war movement was, not just for protesting the war, but infiltrating the U.S. itself and how it's infiltrated so many aspects of our society. So this is very, very big because this shows the Soviet Union's involvement in all of this. So according to Lunev in this book, he says that the Soviet Union spent more money on these anti-war groups such as Weatherman Underground, Black Panthers, SDS, all the groups that we were just talking about during the Vietnam War than actually funding the Vietnam War, arming the Viet Cong. So this was a really, really big deal. He also had warned of poisoning of the Potomac River. Watch the water, right? According to Lunev, a possible scenario in the event of war would have been poisoning the Potomac River with chemical or biological weapons, targeting the residents of Washington, D.C. He also considered it likely that GRU operatives placed poison supplies near the tributaries to major U.S. reservoirs. And I'm going to play you a little bit of an interview from him. The audio is a little bit tricky because it's kind of old, so you're going to have to kind of listen in, but listen to what he has to say.
When you ask a Russian spy when he defected, and he says 1992, you figure, oh, well, the Cold War was over. Not so fast. Not so fast. This can only be radio. This can't be television because there's a price on Stan Lunev's head. Stan Lunev, colonel in the Russian intelligence setup, defected after the Cold War was allegedly over. Colonel Lunev, welcome to these proceedings. We cannot show your face, but we can certainly hear your voice and your message. When you defect, top Russian agent, you are debriefed by the CIA. Our listeners right now, it is as though you are sitting in a CIA briefing because you will hear exactly what the CIA and other American intelligence agencies have heard from Colonel Stan Lunev. First of all, again, welcome to America. I would have said welcome to the free world, but we thought we thought Russia was free in 1992.
Thank you, Barry. But you know, to operate information which we do have from liberal American press, it's not totally correct, because Cold War, we need to understand what it is. It was confrontation between two great military powers, and fortunately this confrontation doesn't exist in the same form which it existed for about 40 years. But look around. Instead of friendly Russia or some kind of mystical partner China, just now America is facing to strategic military alliance between so-called democratic Russia and totalitarian China. With tens of thousands of Russian nuclear warheads and actually unlimited number of Chinese ground forces, this alliance is much more dangerous than it been in time of, you already said, Cold War. Plus, just now Russia and China are very active in establishment of partnership, strategic cooperation with such countries like North Korea, Vietnam, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Cuba, actually Venezuela. And in the nearest time, if American politicians will not take some kind of appropriate policy according to this area, America will face to the coalition of powers extremely hostile to the United States and to the Western civilization.
The United States borders Canada, and there's all kind of cooperation between the United States and Canada. That doesn't threaten Russia or China. Now turn the page. China and Russia have a very long border. What evidence do we have that there's anything threatening to us going on between Russia and China?
First of all, American people are not informed that confrontation between former Soviet Union and China, which was based on ideological difficulties and differences between two communist parties, doesn't exist anymore. Yes, in 50s, in 60s, there have been several open military conflicts between two countries, but they were based on ideological differences between Communist Party of Soviet Union and Chinese Communist Party. After Communist Party in Russia was removed from power, there is no ideological problems. Moreover, these countries are developing very close economical, political and military cooperation during last 10 years. And until now they reach level of strategic military alliance, which could not be directed to nowhere. It would be directed against America and American friends and allies worldwide. And this is real danger for the United States national security. Russian propaganda tried to deliver to Russian people idea that this foreign enemy, which already destroyed former Soviet Union, destroyed Yugoslavia, organize separatist tension in Russian Northern Caucasus, and the next step, this foreign enemy would like to destroy Mother Russia itself. They fixed their fingers at the United States and American friends and allies, first of all by NATO organization. I worked in these archives over my dissertation. I found out that very well-known leaders of international communism and socialism, they were actually insane. They were not normal people. I saw a lot of papers with their handwritten notes when Lenin, Stalin, Zinoviev, Kamenev, Trotsky, they sacrificed millions of Russian people for mystical, ideological, which could not be realized ideas. And after this I didn't work for any kind of ideology. I worked for my country only, until I came to the United States, where I found for myself that Soviet propaganda lied to me, to other Soviet people, about America, American way of life, American society, about everything. So I changed my mind.
Okay, so those were some snippets from a longer interview, which I will leave in the video description on YouTube. But I think it's really important to take away some points that Stanislav Lunev was making. First of all, he mentions tens of thousands of missiles, nuclear warheads, not to mention the squillions of troops that China can provide. That's extremely dangerous. And if you think about Russia or China on their own, they might not seem like such a threat, although they're very much a formidable foe. The two of them together would be devastating. And it seems to me like Q has hinted in their reference to the sum of all fears. Well, in this movie, what happens is this faction of people end up trying to set off a nuclear warhead at a massive football game so that will trigger the U.S. into fighting a major superpower. Well, that sounds a little bit like what we're talking about right here, right? Much more dangerous than we could ever imagine. If we got in a war with China and Russia, it would be game over. So they were operating out of all these kinds of proxies. And of course, these proxies we've been talking about in the news over the last few years, especially North Korea, Iran, Syria, Ukraine, Pakistan. Just like any kind of war games, these are geographically strategic, as well as being able to create black sites where you can operate and do all kinds of stuff that you need to do to generate your own revenue and whatnot. You understand how it works. So he goes on to talk about this clash of idealism back in the day, sharing a border. And of course, once communism was reinstated in Russia, they seemed to get along a lot better. No kidding. Well, it looks like this alliance has built up a lot bigger than maybe we suspected. Keep in mind, he was warning us of this in 1992, saying that we should be very afraid. So you can only imagine how this is built up. But also keep in mind, I think there's an element that every single one of these major superpowers seems to have their own deep state element, as well as their own loyalists, patriots, or whatever you want to call them. But he states it as being a real, clear, and present danger. And this is the kind of faction that at some point would even infiltrate Russia and destroy Russia, which means Russians have a reason to care about this, just like we care about our own deep state. So it kind of starts to make sense, right? Now, I've talked a great deal on this channel about Ukraine and how Ukraine has been used as a proxy to destabilize Russia. And now that kind of seems to make sense, right? And much of this has been funded by George Soros. As a matter of fact, late last year, there were some recent documents that were released stating just that. And I think he mentions NATO. I'm not sure if I hear him quite correctly there, but I think he mentioned NATO. But I think what he was implying is that through these sort of international groups, much of these different kinds of operations can be funded militarily, financially, however it needs to be. But of course, George Soros has always been a big fan of destabilizing Russia, and he's been very clear about saying that he was going to use Ukraine to do it. Now, there's another family that I've mentioned a couple of times that have done this not only for decades, but for centuries, destabilizing Russia, and that would be the Schiff family. So it all starts to make sense. When you look at it that way, you can kind of see the different elements occurring in every single one of these nations. But one of the key kickers there at the very end is that he said this group of people, all of these knuckleheads, all of these deep staters, whatever you want to call them, are insane. And they're willing to sacrifice millions over mystical ideologies. That sounds dangerous. Post 834, the bridge, 187. Bridge 2 at Snowden. Well, it looks like Snowden's in a very interesting situation too. Is this guy a double agent? Does he work for the CIA? Does he work for the FBI? Was he working for the NSA? Probably not. He was warning against the NSA, it looked like. Looks like this guy might be a clown. CIA. The link, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Russia, intercontinental ballistic missile tech. Well, that all kind of puts it into perspective, right? Maybe that's why the CIA wanted to get into all this tech. Maybe that's why they were setting up servers out there in North Korea to skirt the NSA so that they could use programs like this to spy on really half the world and use it to fund and operate tech. Russia ICBM Tech, HRC open source. Well, HRC was kind of the person that hooked everybody up, right? She was letting everybody jump onto those emails, hack into those emails. Special access programs, those are what were on those emails. What are special access programs? All the things that give you access to Russia ICBM Tech. John Podesta, Tony Podesta, highest levels of U.S. government, Uranium One, North Korea. North Korea had those servers. Why would Russia tell the world? Well, maybe because Russia, just like the United States, was tired of it. Maybe that's why Putin wants to work with President Trump. Maybe not, but maybe. Why? Why is Seth Rich back in the news? Because it was whatever was on that thumb drive that's going to give us a lot of answers. Why? Why is Sessions acting weak? Because he doesn't want anybody to know so that we can go ahead and investigate it without it getting leaked and ruined. Why? IG report, no legit leaks? MSM staging narrative. Well, if we know that the MSM is involved with the CIA, we understand why they feel the need to cover it up. And if we know that the CIA is involved with all these tech companies, we know why they're trying to ban us online. It all makes sense, right? Why? Enjoy the show. Dead Cat Bounce. Now let's talk a little bit about this guy right here, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and he's been around for quite some time. He was a former Carter advisor, Jimmy Carter, and he's had his finger in a lot of pies over the years. And I'll offer up one qualifier right off the bat. He's not just a member, but an organizer of the Trilateral Commission. You can thank this guy right here for developing the relationship between the U.S. and China. And to be fair, that's a double-edged sword. There's some good things and some bad things that have come out of that. But I do want to point out that he has largely favored mainland China. Taiwan, not so much. Very similar with the Eastern Bloc as opposed to the Soviet Union. He seems to really want to build up Eastern Europe. Wasn't a big fan of Russia. I should also point out that he was a member on the Council on Foreign Relations and also the group whose name that I can't say, but it's a group where you can go to build your own burger. Incidentally, that's the very group that seems to be pushing this in pursuit of tooth these days. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Anyway, so this guy was also an advisor to John F. Kennedy, and he was the one that was sort of saying, hey, let's ease up on Khrushchev a little bit. Don't worry about those Cuban missiles. Don't worry about it. Russia's not such a big deal. All right, well, according to Stanislav Lunev, it might not be the case, right? It looks like we have a conflict of interest here. But that is your boy Brzezinski. He was sort of offered up to the world as the anti-Henry Kissinger, if you will, but he was just another Rockefeller knucklehead, and he's also the father of NBC anchor Mika Brzezinski. So there you go, and there's some interesting stuff in this article, and sorry I didn't really cover much of this itself. Maybe there's something in particular that I'm missing here, but there's a couple of different things that they talk about that I thought was pretty interesting. Mostly the KGB stuff. The Kim Philby story is an interesting story as well, but then they talk here about George Bush when he was head of the CIA issuing a regulation barring any direct ties between the agency and American news. Well, that seemed to be cosmetic only, right? Admiral Stansfield Turner, who replaced him, just basically issued a memo restating it, so it just looked like a little bit of optics, if you will. Down here in this part, they go on to talk about Nicholas Danilov, and he's another interesting story. Spied for the CIA in Moscow. It is not surprising that Soviet officials suspect American reporters of espionage. Yeah, there was actually a spy trade-off that went down with this. Pretty interesting story. This might actually have to do with what Q is wanting to get into, but I'm going to look more into this story and maybe we'll have more to tell later. It'll probably pop up if it becomes really apparent. But again, it's Soviet spying and showing you how deeply entrenched this really is. Let me just read this part right here to give you an idea. Last week, Danilov said he may have triggered Soviet suspicions when he worked energetically and probed deeply to report on such subjects as Soviet military units in Afghanistan, another proxy, right? Nuclear waste dumps, and the shooting down of Korean Airlines Flight 007, right? Spying, Russia. But it looks like the Russian collusion is actually within our alphabet agencies. I think that's the big idea. Goes on to talk about these ABC and CBS correspondents, and that, shouldn't surprise you at all because they're fake news, and that's exactly why they are fake news. Now we're moving in cruise mode because I just realized that I'm running super late if I'm going to get this video out today. So we'll just kind of do near future style, little cruise mode. All right, hang on to your seats. We're going phaser warp, quantum leap and jumping style, whatever, 4304. This is a link to Fox News talking about Senator Ratcliffe, who has just been approved now as our new DNI. This guy seems to be a good guy, seems very dogged about getting the documents released and standing up for the POTUS, which I think is great. Anything is better than Dan Coates, who seemed to have obviously been standing in the way. 4305, 4306, and 7 are all kind of talking about the same thing. And we've talked extensively about this. The HCQ, the DROX, the hydroxychloroquine, the hydroxychloroquinones. Just take it or don't take it. Take it or don't take it. Journalists don't want you to take it. Maybe you should take it. If your doctor says you should take it, take it. If you don't want to take it, don't take it. All right? I don't have Rona. Maybe you do. Maybe you do. I'm not judging if you do. All right, I just want you to know that if you have the Rona and you're a little bit nervous about announcing it around here, don't worry about it. We're all your friends here. Just keep your distance or whatever you got to do. Maybe take the D-Rocks or don't, a little Zithro, a little bit of Zinco. All right, I don't know. You do what you got to do. Talk to your doctor. Just be careful about these vaccines because that's what they're talking about, all right? 4306, talking about the same thing, trying to convince people that the vaccine is what we need. The fact of the matter is that they just want you in your home, staying scared so that you can be tracked. That's the whole purpose, and we've talked about it extensively. 4307, we're talking about stuff in the ballot box, which is just another result of all that, right? Mailing it in from home. Adam Schiff was just tweeting about it today, saying it's a great way to go. This is the way we needed to do it. Why is the president, not letting us do it? He's disturbing our democracy. The fact of the matter is that we all know why. Because of this right here. There's stuff in the ballot box. So screw those guys. 4308. 14 minutes after the hour 2, the Twitter status is to MAGA Mama, who says, at Mika Brzezinski, actually truthful on hashtag Morning Joe, as if there were any doubt, it's our jobs to control what other people think. Check it out.
And I think that the dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job.
Yeah, if you look
that is our job.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because we were just talking about her and her dad and whatever. I wonder if that's worth remembering. Q says it is. 4309, we get taken back to post 3373 from the 9th of July, 2019. Surveillance of, and that Essie is Sarah Carter and John Solomon. So somebody was watching Sarah Carter and John Solomon sleep well. The link is to Fox News. Q again says worth remembering soon. From Fox, Representative Devin Nunes out of California said Wednesday that he intends to ask the State Department for more information about strange and irregular requests allegedly made by ousted U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, to monitor the communications of U.S. journalists in the country. To monitor the communications of U.S. journalists in the country. Nunes, the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, said on Fox News Hannity that he's looking to ask Yovanovitch during her scheduled testimony Friday about her alleged efforts to monitor reporters. Yovanovitch, who was appointed ambassador to Ukraine by former President Barack Obama in 2016 and recalled by the State Department in May of this year, is scheduled to give a deposition as part of a Democratic-led impeachment inquiry against President Trump. She remains a State Department employee, and it's unclear whether the administration will block her appearance. Here's what he had to say. What I've heard, I don't want to be clear, there's a difference. What I've heard is that there were strange requests, irregular requests to monitor not just one journalist, but multiple journalists, Nunes told Sean Hannity. Now, perhaps that was okay. Perhaps there was some reason for that it can be explained away. But That's what we want to know, and that's what we're going to be looking into. Hannity said multiple sources have told him that they believe there's evidence that government resources were used to monitor communications of U.S. journalists and that Yovanovitch may have been involved. And let's also not forget that Yovanovitch wanted to make sure that nobody was looking into any corruption over there. She actually handed over the this sort of no prosecute list to the prosecutor in Ukraine. So she didn't want her people looked after, but it looks like she was doing some monitoring of her own. Well, Q says worth remembering soon, so I wonder if what we find there will have anything to do with these previous posts about intel agencies and reporters and the clerics and you and I. We'll see. Those are your Q posts. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. All my alternate links are down below. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay focused.